Cultures include school cultures, can be good or bad, leading to good human ends, poor ones. A strong positive school culture engages in the hearts and minds of children, stretching them intellectually, physically, morally, and socially. A school with a weak negative culture may have the same type of facility, student teacher ratio, curriculum, a neighbor school. Socialization. Along with food, shelter, loving care, adults pass their culture on to their young. A major part of the culture are the skills and attitudes necessary to function in a particular society. In our contemporary American society, we expect that most people will try to get along with one another, cooperating, cooperatively and look at the families. The talk of the passing of society's culture to the young called socialization, defined as an general process of social learning whereby the child learns the many things necessary to become a well-functioning, acceptable member of a particular social environment. Besides the family, the major socializing agencies in the life of a young person are the schools, peers, religious institutions, young organizations, the mass media, and behave in a manner acceptable to the agency members. Some agencies, such as school, informally created to organize. Others, such as peer groups, are informed, created, and casually organized. Schools, as one of the most common institutions in the United States, have a significant role in teaching young people how to be social in an American context. Every school attempts to socialize children by getting them the value of the things. The school teaches both explicitly and implicitly. The students who tend to succeed in school typically accept these values, where many of the less successful students reject the thinking that behaving in school tries to teach. What are these values and how they communicate in students? Our research suggests that schools value several specific ways of thinking and behaving. For example, schools encourage complement behavior as opposed to personal initiative. Students learn to give the teacher what is wanted or expected. Reward systems and used by schools to teach students to read both in teacher and assembly to children what is expected to get the grade. The teacher's attention or the sticker with a smiling face. Similarly, competitiveness is learned through athletics, grading systems, and then compare students to one another, and ability grouping to separate students into class according to their achievement levels. The many the many ways in which students learn with the school values include a moment of time located at each subject study. The established school rules can even in the architecture of the school. As a future teacher, you should work with be able to read school cultures, which rules of behavior, rituals and ceremonies, and accepted patterns of teacher and student interaction are communicated to students in a particular school. Does the climate of the classroom and the school suggest warmth, support, and nurturing of individuals, or do you observe a mood or distinct distress, reminiscence, and antipathy among staff and students? Most importantly, what is school's deeper message about how the students should participate in society in the future and what stance they should take towards its culture? Schools as transmitters or recreators of culture. There are two views of models of how U.S. schools should socialize students. One, the schools and social institutions where the young receive from the old generation the very best of their culture. Two, the school at the social institution where the young skills and become agents of social change. Transmitting culture. In the model of the school and agriculture, schools exist to advance society by ensuring that the young and the appropriate dominate ideas and values of their society's culture. The goal of culture transmissions the U.S. public schools to teach the American way of looking at the world and American way of doing things. This desire to ensure that there are young and share their common culture may explain why in many U.S. school systems we teach American history in the 3rd, 7th, and 11th grades. It can also explain why, for instance, we give little attention to the histories of China and India. Even though they are among the most population nations on earth, both have old, rich cultural heritage. Without being even conscious of it, our teachers induct our young in their variation of reality in our own way of handling the real world. The schools of their country do the same in their own young, of course. Schools in Iran, for instance, differ markedly from schools in Ghana, and both differ dramatically from their counterparts in the United States. Even the schools in the country are attempting to perform a similar function to transmit unique culture in the country and the newest members of the young. Peoples who view the schools as transmitting culture usually talk about society as an organism that is living in that can thrive and deteriorate based on how all the different elements of a society function together. When a society is healthy, each of the various components of government, schools, community is in. Individuals do what is out doing and the works in concert and the other components. Conflicts is viewed negatively and society works toward finding consensus among different groups and eliminating any conflict. From this perspective, it is virtually important to the older generation, including parents and teachers, help the young find values meaning in their own culture so they will internalize its values and contribute functioning. Agriculturism. agriculture and diversity. Several dangers lurk beneath the surface when schools adopt a position that they should concentrate or transmit the dominant culture. If schools offer the young an understanding of only the prevailing culture, the result may be an attitude of smug cultural superiority, which often leads to nations and individuals in to commit foolish actions. In cultural terms, what do we know when we often do not respect and instantaneous electronic communications? Missile delivered nuclear weapons and intrepid national economics have increasingly made the world a global village, and our students won't learn how to function in the new world. In recent decades, the United States has also experienced a surge in immigration from Central America, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and elsewhere. These new Americans tend to be young, and both the newly arrived parents and their children are hungry for schooling. Although most are eager to learn American ways and American culture, teachers and students like need to consider these students' native cultures. The majority of these immigrant children speak a language other than English at home. Sometimes schools, as part of agricultural children, unintentionally pull them more from their individual ethnic backgrounds. For example, 1 in 5 U.S. students goes home at night to a family in which English is a second language. As they become agriculture, using English becomes more important for these children, and further, for languages become something private, rarely used in public. Other schools, for example, elementary schools in California, sever large populations of newly arrived Mexican children. Teachers design the classroom so that American and Hispanic cultures are honored, and the children learn to operate effectively in both languages. The presence of new Americans in a school can be a valued resource in the effort to increase manufactural understanding and appreciation. Although U.S. schools need to transmit American culture, we must realize that we are called American culture has always embraced many cultures. Nevertheless, a primary responsibility of the school is to assist foreign-born students in acquisition of a high level of English proficiency, a delicate and politically charged balanced act. We will return to this thorny issue when we discuss multiculturalization and bilingual education in Chapter 3. Who are today's students in a diversity society? Reconstruction society. The realization that the modern world is a dangerous place faced with many complex issues from the international terrorists and nuclear weapons to widespread hunger and social injustice has led educators to post that schools must become a tool that social reconstruction. Instead of seeing schools as places of past collective wisdom flows down into capacity, interest, and to make use of it, the educators assume a much more active and even assertive role of the school. According to the perspective of schools, the teachers should work toward activating the students' interest and committing to improve society. Unlike those who wish to transmit culture, educators who wish to reconstruct society accept the existence of conflicts among differing groups and look at them as important tools to understand these groups' view of social problems. Called social reconstructionists, these people see the role of schools as forming the young ages into change and participating in the decision about how society needs to change. Compared to those committed to a cultural transmission, they have the less reference to accumulated wisdom of the past, more concern for the world's problems and the necessity of to create a new order. They reject the idea of schools being sorting machines, separating students for different life. Role models see successful student and not so much as cultivated person, but as an autonomous citizen ready to join with others tackle the world ill and help in the reconstruction of society. Even among social reconstruction, however, a wide range of instances are evident. Social reconstruction fall into two broad categories: democratic reconstructionists and economic reconstructionists. Democratic reconstructionists. Democratic reconstructionists see the solution to certain trends and current issues such as racism, poverty, and the destruction of the ecosystem as Langen and Usher aroused in schools scenario. The school's mission then is to prepare students for vigorous participation in their government. The focus of schooling is on developing knowledge of democratic process, critical thinking skills, group process skills, so that the students can fruitfully work with the others for social improvement. In more active programs, students select, study, and work on community environmental problems such as the polluting of landfills with unrecycled garbage. Economic reconstructionists. Economic reconstructionists tend to take a harsher view of the dominant culture and see schools as pilot servants of those in power. The influence on corporate values and see many phases of school life, from the way textbooks are used to get widespread use of testing. Moreover, economic reconstructionists often argue that schools claim to serve the needs of all, but in the fact the needs that of the elites, the people with the most power. Economic reconstructionists that schools d- disguise this fact either by their own naive or by their willing support of the existing system because of the deep suspicion sometimes outright discussed with capitalism, economic reconstruction are often labeled neo-Marxist. One noted economic reconstructionist was the Brazilian educator Pablo Freire. First book, the Pedagogy of the Oppressed, describes his work with the poverty-stricken, illiterate peasants in his native Brazil. As Freire tried to teach these adults to read, he saw they were trapped in an economic and social web over what they had little control. Likewise, the normal merchants of the education, such as grading and control by the teacher, imposed on the peasants a passivity and subversive authority. For Freire, the typical methods of routines of schooling are a form of oppression, and that they keep people from the methods or routines of schooling and from oppression, and that they keep from the fully and independent. To counter this tendency, Freire taught literacy by helping peasants name the problem polluted water supply, analyze the problem sewage contamination of springs, and three, collective take the action, design and build new sewage systems to solve the problem. The four basic purposes of school. Having most likely spent 12, 13 years in school, the better part of your life, you are probably convinced you know the territory. Isn't it obvious what schools are and what they do, perhaps? Yet most of us tend to think schools in limited ways are our own experience with a relatively few school influence what we think about all all important schools from the different vantage points. The two missions we just examined, schools for transmission and culture of Reconstruction Society, represent. What should our schools be trying to do? This fairly straightforward, almost innocent question is, however, also perennial and has stirred fierce arguments among different groups. If residents have strongly conflicting views about what their commonly schools should do, the question can rip apart a fabric of a contemporary American culture and society that what they want schools to do for their children. To illustrate that point, we have included several quotes about schools in this section. Some were written centuries ago, and others more recently. As you read each and think about how the speaker characters the function of schools and education, also think about your own schooling. Intellectual purposes. Jacques Barzun is a cultural historian who writes frankly about the current state of schools in America. What do we really want from our schools? Given the public's muddling feelings about brain work, what is which excellent refers to, and the parafictional up to now about what children are being taught, the schools have a double fights on its hands against ignorance inside the walls and against cultural prejudice outside. The president's lying so deep that those that harbor it even know they do. The difficulties of schooling do not change. Difficulties remain. It will always be difficult to teach well, to learn accurately, to read, write, and continually acquire a sense of history, developed only by the most concerted efforts of teachers that can be called satisfactory. Political and civic purpose. Now let's consider a quote from Thomas Jefferson that is a different purpose of school. Although the writing style is dated, the idea is that one has been constant in American public schools since the beginning. You will read more about the Jefferson's contributions to the American public and schools in Chapter 10. What is history of the American struggle for education opportunity? For now, note that Jefferson hoped that American schooling would help establish and sustain the United States of American infant nation. One of the overriding concerns of the early political leaders was in the fact that people would learn about being about American and non-English subjects. The Jefferson quote underscores the political and civic purpose of the schooling. Jefferson thought schools could help people learn how to govern themselves wisely, just in the sure way country have well-informed citizens through systematic education. The schooling can bring you they need to know more or less. In your own schools, you may have been seeing political and civic purposes emphasized through student governing elections, voter registration drives, citizen education programs, and even community service and outreach programs. Schools promote these purposes by how much they teach and to read, write, and discuss ideas rationally. Economic purposes. Let's consider one or more perspectives in light of your own school experiences. Gene Anion and educational research has investigated the connection between economics and schooling for a number of years. When inner city students and their access to the range of services provided realistic expectation that education will lead them to better jobs, life, and the future as expected to the most middle class and affluent homes, then the students will have reason to make an educational effort. Realistic expectations that education will make a substantial positive difference in the lives of the students may also motivate teachers and other schools to staff at a higher level of performance. At that point, the teachers' principles and the quality of curriculum can more easily make a difference in the lives of the inner city of the poor. Social purposes were identified intellectual, political, and economic purposes of schools. A fourth purpose is called the umbrella purpose because it is so encompassing. Consider this a lay quote and think about what it means. If education has collective function above all of its object, adapt a child is social milieu in which he is destined to live. It is possible that society should be uninterested in such a procedure. It is then up to the state to remind the teacher constantly of the ideas, sensing that must be impressed upon what him and milieu must live. What do studies reveal about nature of schools? What happens in schools and how does the activity in a school contribute to or detract from its purpose? Research often look at everyday events of human life and see patterns the rest of us may only vaguely aware of. In the next several pages, we present a few of these studies and examine the patterns of the research. Notice focusing first on elementary schools, then on the middle schools, on junior high schools, and finally on high schools. Life in elementary schools. One of the best perspectives on how time is usually spent in elementary classroom is Philip W. Jackson. Classic study of life in classrooms. Anthropologists have taught us that 100 aspects of the human existence have cultural significance. Have you ever figured out how many hours a child spends in school? In most states, the school year is 180 days. The day typically begins at 8:30 a.m. and ends at 3 p.m. So a total of 1 hours. If a child doesn't miss a day of school, he or she spends more than 1,000 hours in school each year, including kindergarten. The average child by the end of sixth grade will spend more than 7,000 hours in elementary. How are those hours typically spent? In pondering the questions, you may think for the first curriculum, which justifies that many hours are of reading, literature, arts, mathematics, science, play, social studies, music, art, and so on. But what does the students really do when they are studying subjects? They talk to each other or the teacher. They read silently and aloud. They yawn. They look out the window. They raise their hands. They line up. They stand up. They sit down. In short, they do a number of different things. Many of them components to the trivial to understand why some of these things go first and when the teacher does. The teacher's role. Jackson has observed that an elementary school teacher engages in as many as 1,000 interpersonal interchanges each day. The teaching learning process consists for more part of the talking, and the teacher controls and directs discussion. These teachers act as gatekeepers, deciding who shall speak. One of the most debate whether this should be a teacher's role, but clearly most teachers function this way. The teacher also acts as a dispenser of supplies because both space and resources are limited and because the number of students wishing to use them at any one time is likely to be greater than the supply. The teacher must dole them out. A related function is a grantor of special privileges in serving students, passing out milks, sharpening pencils, taking the roll, or spending the time at the computer. Although a little teacher and structure classroom socially as a system rewards as punishment. All these teacher functions can be seen as response to the crowded conditions in the classroom. If teachers were dealing with a student at the time material situations, the gatekeeping, dispensal of supplies, granting special privileges, and timekeeping would be necessary. Given that a tutorial setting is not possible, much of the energy was spent keeping order. The resulting atmosphere has unavoidable effects on the students. What students what students experience. One inevitable outcome for students is that results of the teacher's traffic management functions delayed because the students' actions are limited by space, material resources, and the amount of teacher attention they can command there. Are definite limits on their freedoms in the class is additionally because of how class ordinarily moves toward a goal and as a group rather than as individuals, and its slowest members often determine space. Denial of desire is another common experience of an elementary student. A question goes unanswered and a raised hand is ignored. Talking out will in turn permits relief of bodily functions allowed only at specific times. Some denial necessary probably beneficial, but one thing is certain: delayed gratification is denied desire learned in the school, and a certain amount of student frustration is bound to develop. Students also experience frequent interruptions of many sorts, such as interruptions, see work by teacher, giving additional instructions, clarify one student's questions, interruptions with message from principal's office are allowed to class, interruptions from drills, interruptions from the teachers working with one student and another student behaves, or so on. Students are expected to either ignore these instructions or to quickly resume to their activities. The emphasis on an inflexible schedule contributes to the same sense of by often making students begin activities before their interest has been aroused and stop at the height of their interest when the schedule dictates that they must begin another task. A related phenomenon of social distraction: students are often asked to behave as if they were alone when they were actually surrounded by 20 to 30 other people during a science seat, where, for example, communication among students is often discouraged. It is forbidden to be surrounded by friends, sometimes seated across. Life in middle and junior high schools. In the middle years 11 to 13, students change in fundamental ways, becoming more independent, more social, and more involved in the world around them. It can be a stressful period for parents and teachers, for the most, especially for students themselves. Increasingly, these middle years are seen to be crucial time in the individual formation. Early adolescence characterized by a variety of developing changes and needs that are dramatically among the major changes. The shopping mall in high school. The important move towards standards based on education, which will be discussed more fully in Chapter 5. What is taught in Chapter 12? How should education be reformed? And has been fueled by for many sources. One of the most severe high schools have confusion of goals, but also they had come quite lax. This goal confusion and laxity was brought to the attention of the educators and the general public a few decades ago by a research study that has compares the high schools to shopping malls. The metaphor states that, like a shopping mall, our schools cater to a variety of student consumers, emphasizing variety of the choice, trying to have something for everyone. Schools have offered a different curriculum in an attempt to appeal all corners. The student customers, should on the other hand, are expected to make their own correction selections. Staying with the shopping mall metaphor, this study found that some customers are serious about buying, others are just browsing and looking for ideas on the way to buy, and such others on the mall to meet and friends. Faced with customers and different levels of commitment, teachers reach commotions or treaties that promote mutual goals or keep the peace. For example, some teachers make their deals crystal clear when they advise students, don't take my class if you don't want to work. If students don't want to play by these rules, then don't have to take the course. Another teacher in the study said, don't try me, I won't hassle you. I'll let you slide through if you want to interfere with the students who want to work. Within shopping mall, high school can be found, especially shops for students and families wanting to more learning and school engagement. In contrast, the average of the unspectacled students, often called average general or male or regular, are generally ignored by the specifically shops that they do not receive additional commitment or time per personal relationships, intensity of the general to the specifically shop students. They have no important outlets, advocates, or the treaties that characterized by avoiding and learning school. Okay, here we go. What is a good school? First, the obvious: not all schools are good schools. Second, good schools do not just happen; they are made. A school is a product of people, intellectual and physical energies at any particular moment. The way a school reflects the multiplicity of efforts that have gone into creating and maintaining it. Further, like towns and civilizations, schools rise and fall. They are human creations, dynamic and continuously on the move. No school, at least in the author's experience, is right or good for all students. Nevertheless, some schools are strikingly better than others. That is, some schools provide a significantly better education for a much larger percentage of their students than do others. These schools, referred to as the educational literature as effective schools, are the focus of this section. Defining an effective school has been a major concern of the educators for several decades. A popular definition of an effective school is one in which learning for all students and to maximize. Although this definition is certainly compelling, it is hardly precise. Characteristics of an effective school. Beginning almost 30 years ago, a number of educational researchers began looking for characteristics or qualities of effective schools. Among the most significant characteristics they found to be correlated with high achievement in the basic skills were high expectations for student performance, communicating among teachers, a task orientation among the staff's ability to keep students on task, an expenditure of a little more time to behavior management, and the principal's instructional leadership, the participation of the parents in the school's environment. The teacher's expectations. Through their attitude and regular encouragement, teachers in effective schools communicate to students their belief and the students will achieve the goals of instruction. In effect, the teachers get across to students can-do attitude about learning. We discuss teacher expectations more in Chapter 6. Communicating among teachers. Teachers in effective schools do not operate in a vacuum, each in his or her isolated classroom. Instead, they talk among themselves about their work and converse about one another's such students. They know the circular materials and activities that go on in one's classrooms, and they are helpful with one another. In short, effective schools have teachers who are good colleagues. Academic engaged time. Academic exchange time refers to the amount of time studying students are actually engaged in relevant content related to activities while experiencing high rate of success. As Reed described in Chapter 6, his characteristics involves the ability of teachers and students engaged in a task in which they're solving which problems. Okay, we are almost done, and we are. Why teach your final word? In your journal, online, and the textbooks websites, respond to the following questions. Had you thought about your schooling being a culture? In what ways do you think your cultures and schools you attended reflected the changed you? 2. Review the purposes of the schooling described in the text. Which one appeals most to you as the potential educator? Why? What do you see as the unfinished work of the schools? Specifically, what changes do you believe must take place for schools to serve as the current generation of children? The end.